between 1500s and 1920. Name as many styles or musical eras as you can, all at the same time. Go. Classical, Baroque, Renaissance, Impressionistic, polyphonic textures.
Tin Pan Alley.
Oh my god.
Okay, with the exception if anyone could hear that one, there's so many things, and here's that's so stupid. Those are all considered classical music. Classical music is the worst term in the world. That covers like 20,000 different genres. So I was thinking, okay, this is originally a jazz episode, and this is where I started going with it. And I started thinking, well, if these are all these different genres are under one word, what if the genre has just been mislabeled, the actual word? What if genre is simply a difference between content and style? That's it. That's all genre is. And if we go down that way of thinking, what else could be classical music? Folk, bluegrass, pop? Or could classical music and jazz be interchangeable? Which led me to the title of this, which is, as a classically trained musician who plays in a string quartet, am I already jazz? Okay, what style is that?
I don't know the style, but I think swing.
Yeah,
Swing,
yeah,
okay.
swing. Yeah.
Other things? Other genres or any larger umbrella things?
Dance. I
Dance?
want to go dance.
Scat, maybe. I don't
Scat?
know.
Is it jazz?
Yeah.
Okay, what makes it those things?
Well, swing's the obvious one. It's the rhythm of swung. That's like a technical thing.
Like the
That-
placement
that-
of
yeah, yeah.
specific fields. What else?
The tonality? To me, the tonality, which I know is super cheap because I can think of exceptions to this as I'm saying it, but my brain took that shortcut.
I'm so glad you said that. Let's play something else. We're going to play something else that is very clearly not jazz. Maybe, but it's the exact same chord progression that we just played. I mean, exact. Bar by bar. It's the exact same thing. But let's hear what it sounds like.
That's funny because I know this piece so well. Who knows how many times performed it. And the whole time we were playing it, I was thinking about the other version. Oh, I guess this is the same. Wow, why does it feel?
Well, let me ask, what style or genre is this that we just played?
I can tell you what I wouldn't think of, and
Sure.
it's jazz. I just wouldn't, which again maybe is incorrect.
What else is it not?
Dance music.
Not dance.
Rock.
I would say it's not strict classical era music. Is it romantic?
Probably.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Is it postmodern?
Yeah.
We're getting into
Yeah,
it. I know.
yeah.
Yes. Yes. Kind of. Yes.
So I don't want to take credit for anything. This last thing that we played, the slow one, is by Shostakovich. Actually, can you tell us about the piece? Because I know you know it so well.
Oh. Yeah, it belongs to a set of two movements together. I think they call it two pieces for string quartet, but they're taken from other works of his. The other one is a polka. This is the elegy or adagio, and one is I think from Lady Macbeth, and one is from the Golden Age. And I think they were just pieces he liked and repurposed for string quartet, and they're done usually as a pair.
So the second thing we played is that. The very first thing you heard, what I did was I took this piece and I made what I would thought of as a jazz version of it. Again, it's the same content in terms of melodic figuration. It's the exact same harmonic progression. For most of it, it's the same voicing. This episode was originally about how does jazz translate to the string quartet? And the further I went into this, the more I started thinking, well, it translates to the string quartet the way every other genre does. Actually, this isn't the interesting thing. The more interesting thing is what makes it jazz. And have been led down these two different roads of how does jazz work for the string quartet, and I don't know. I think genre is simply style versus content. And I want to try and show that today along this idea of jazz. Now, I had the awesome opportunity to get to have a really wonderful conversation with a musician that we know, and he's a jazz musician. He does jazz for a living. I don't have that much experience with jazz. I played in a jazz band for 2 years in undergrad. I own a bunch of Thelonious Swung albums that do get listened to. A lot of friends when I was in Nashville were in the jazz scene, so I went to a lot. But really, other than that, it's not like I've gone into depths of studying it. So I thought, I really want to talk to someone who this is what they do. And as trite as it was actually kind of pleasurable in a weird way. The very first thing I asked him was, what is jazz? Let's hear what he had to say.
American jazz really is kind of a mixture of the African-American tradition, American music, swing as polyrhythm, the West Africa, 3-on-2 feel, perception of time, European classical tradition, harmony, mid-late French Impressionists, 40s and 50s, 1900s, polyrhythmic, Debussy, now the 1800s, Shostakovich.
Okay, so now I have to be fair to he's going to introduce himself in a second. I have to be fair to him, okay? When I initially asked him what jazz was, his response was amazing. He took a moment to think, and he said, to me, jazz is improvisation. But then for the rest of the conversation, he kept saying all these little jewels of information that it's like, oh my God, jazz isn't just as complex as the one word of classical music for all the genres that we started with, which is why I so eloquently put this little clip together as is. It's made up of tons of things, just like all genres are. There's no genre that exists on its own in a vacuum away from it. In a way, it all kind of combines together. Let's let this man introduce himself.
I am John Shaughnessy. I'm a bass player and composer based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I run my own kind of free jazz groups. I also work with the Charlotte New Music Festival, and I'm a full-time bass player working in commercial music as well. So I kind of do a lot of different things.
So we've actually, you and I, and you two as well, we've actually seen John perform a lot. We've been, at Charlotte New Music Festival every summer for, 6 years? And every time there happens to be an awesome open mic of sorts, and he's always there kind of running it. And I've seen him on bass, on guitar, and some other things. He's a fantastic performer. And what I didn't realize is that he's also a really wonderful composer. He had written a piece called Quiet Phobias that he made it work for string quartet for this summer's festival, and we actually got to perform it. And so that's how we came into contact with John, and I've just had an absolute blast getting to talk to him about this. Now, when we got Quiet Phobias, there was a couple things. I should say it is a jazz piece. And the initial thread was, how did he make this work for string quartet? Because I think it really does. So I'm going to try and tread lightly on these two simultaneously threaded topics of how does he make it work, and is it really jazz, or is it simply a style versus content issue, which I'll kind of unpack as we go. The thing that stuck out to me mostly when I first got Quiet Phobias, and I'd be curious to see how it was for you, is there's no rhythm section. A big part of jazz to me is the rhythm section, the bass, sometimes the piano, and certainly the drums. We don't have that. Now, I mean, you have great rhythm. I have pretty good rhythm, but we're not a rhythm section, I don't think. We work together a lot of the time to create a rhythmic sense. So if someone has been writing jazz charts, I would think that that's an integral part of how they think or how they write. And so that was the first thing I asked him. And let's just dive to John and see what he said.
One of the things I do a lot when I play jazz, and how I kind of learned how to play jazz, was doing jazz duos without a drummer. I kind of learned as a bass player how to drive rhythm forward without actually playing drums. I don't think in terms of like, okay, I got to play this drum pattern on the bass or something to make up for not having a drummer. I think more about, here's this kind of time. Am I going to play an ostinato that drives it forward? Are we going to just have this kind of pulse time that moves back and forward? When I'm thinking about like percussionless string quartet or something like that, I'm really thinking more in terms of like, is there an ostinato that drives it, which there isn't Quiet Phobias? Am I using certain rhythms or cross rhythms to push this forward? Those are the kind of things I think of more than like, well, we have to have a drum beat or something like that in here.
Okay, so he says a lot in there that we need to unpack that I think is wonderful. First off, the second he said, when I started doing jazz, I did it was this duo without the drums. I had this moment of, I feel, yeah, of course that's a thing. Mm-hmm. But still, he said, okay, moving pulse, polyrhythms. We'll get to that. The one that I want to unpack right now is ostinato. First, for anyone who might not know, can someone define an ostinato for us?
Well, it's something that repeats frequently, often unchangingly, and it's a part of the piece that you can't do without.
Yeah, now, I think in any subject, probably in life, but especially in music, it's subtleties that separate compositional constructs. So, can you play us the most famous wedding piece ever, just the cello part, and do it fast so we can get through maybe 2 or 3 revolutions of it?
Let's see if I remember. It's been a while.
Faster. Okay, great. Okay, this goes over and over and over. Is this an ostinato?
To me, it's not.
Me neither. To me, this is a bass line that sets up a canon, and the canon is in actually the melodic parts. Da 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 da. That's what gets canon, and we have a bass line that's underneath it. So, what would make it an ostinato? Like, what would you need to change?
Because that fits his definition, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, it
yeah.
does. To me, one of the first things I thought of is it's a small cell.
Yes.
Like maybe a group of a few notes, something that immediately is recognizable. I don't need, if I had never heard that piece before, which seems impossible, I don't need 16 seconds to have heard it the first time, and then 32 seconds to realize, oh wait, that was the same thing again.
Right.
Maybe I notice in 5 seconds.
So like I said, there's a lot of similar things in music. It's the little minutiae, the detail that make it. The ostinato, I agree, is a small cell. And I do think it's rhythmic in nature. This, to me, the canon, I don't think it's rhythmic. It is. There is rhythm.
I've had a little fun with it in the past, so unbeknownst to my colleagues, but
it's probably why you've survived, is it?
Sure.
So John gives us an ostinato to start, and the viola gets that, and here's what that ostinato is. Clearly very different function than the opening of Mr. Pachelbel's wonderful, overly played piece. A lot of rhythmic drive. A lot of impulse here. I can feel myself being a drummer. The fast notes are a hi-hat thing. There's a kick with every downbeat. Now I know John's saying he's not thinking of replacing drums with that, but just as a player, these functions are in this ostinato, and the fact that it repeats, and the tail end of it is the fact that the tail end is that really makes it fall to the next bar, and then you get 3 simple. So I feel you get very predictable bum bum bum, and then something that falls and makes it have to repeat again. So I think that's a super effective ostinato. So to make this jazz piece work for string quartet that doesn't have a rhythmic section, he uses a compositional construct that we call an ostinato to make it work. Last week, we played some mellets. Wanyatu, string
Wanyatu.
quartet number 5.
Yeah.
Ryan, can you and I just start the second movement of that once? We can find it. I'll put some finding music under this.
Jeopardy theme song, maybe?
Yes, we'll have to get the rights. So, here's Mr. Malitz's second movement of his 5th string quartet. What is that?
Sounds like an ostinato.
That sounds like an ostinato to me, too. It's the same thing. It's a small cell. It's rhythmic in nature. It's creating propulsion, creating drive. It's doing all the same things that John's ostinato does for Quiet Phobias. What style did we just play?
I suppose, well, I'm
That's
cheating
fine.
here, but funk.
Yeah, if
is
you
what
want
I
to know
see.
more about that, you can go to last week's episode and look. Yeah, it's funk. And what we talked about last week is this really rides this realm of classical, non-classical, because there's elements of both. I could make a case that this is slightly more and harmonically less complex Bartok. You know, no, I have to stretch that a little, but so I could see it going. But either way, I don't think the first thing I would think would be jazz. Now let's take that a step further, a little bit more into the ridiculous. Jason, we did an awesome arrangement because Aviva had the awesome idea to do Carol of the Bells. And if you want to see that episode, you can go to 3 or 4 episodes prior and check that out, and you should. This is called Synergy. Can you just play us the opening of Carol of the Bells?
Not our opening.
No, sorry, the standard Carol of the
Sure.
Bells. Ryan, is that jazz?
I don't think so. I don't think of
Do you
it
think?
as jazz.
I don't think
I
so.
thought I heard like a scoff almost when I asked that question.
Oh, no.
No, okay, maybe I'm just. No, to me that's clearly not jazz. Okay, the point that I'm trying to make is, John, to make the jazz piece work for string quartet, because we're missing the rhythmic section, he uses a compositional construct we call an ostinato, but we can find that everywhere. If we want to go even more classical, I think about John Williams' score for The Phantom Menace when it came out. It has this awesome ostinato. This is in a clearly orchestral format that is absolutely a Western style classical writing that's even further removed from jazz than any of the examples we've just done now. So, style versus content? I don't know. Genre? I don't know. Clearly, John's ostinato makes this feel like a jazz piece, but is it just the style of it that does that? Because it has the same function in many other places that I would never think jazz. Okay, that's my first argument, okay? He mentioned a couple of things without having the rhythmic section. And that was the use of, I don't remember his exact word, I'm going to substitute a word, floating pulse or polyrhythm. Let's look at that. Actually, can we hear from John first?
Quiet Phobias actually started off as kind of a Lounge Lizards-ish polyrhythmic jazz piece. And I really kind of wasn't getting to where I wanted to be with it. And I kind of thought, well, let me just write it out. I'll write the whole thing out as a string quartet and then have people who can read it. And then it'll work that way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I started doing that. What I did a lot in there was I was really, I think, kind of thinking, well, I got this 5/8 thing, but I'm playing like what I would call a long rhythm, like a long 3 or a long 5, like you were saying, is my phrase length, and it's kind of overlapping the bar lines. And the way the melody works is your ear would perceive it as maybe a 4 or a 3 or something like that over this 5 ostinato, you know?
So I love hearing him talk about these rhythmic things, and a lot of them tie to last week's episode in a weird way. Let's break this down. Rhythm, okay, to play music that's on a page, we have to notate time. Otherwise, we can't be all playing in the same way. So at the very base level, we have a time signature, which tells you how many beats are in a bar. If I play this opening ostinato from John's Quiet Phobias, you guys already know. If you're listening, what would you guess is the division of beats? How many beats per bar are in there? I think it's a good question because even for trained musicians, I don't think it sounds like already the time signature that it's written in. Or maybe it's not that it doesn't sound that way. It has more nuance to what I typically associate with this particular meter. Jace, can you clap along with me and emphasize the downbeat?
Sure. Do you want me to just clap the downbeats only?
Nope, all of the eighth notes too. So there we get a very strong 5. So we're in 5/8. There are 5 eighth notes to the bar. So at the base level of our understanding of rhythm and use of rhythm in this jazz piece, we have 5 beats to the bar. Now, he does something almost right away after he introduces this that I am going to call, he creates an absence of a beat. Now, Aviva, can you and I just play right on B? Yes. I'm just going to cue 2 quarter notes to start it. Okay, so obviously there are beats happening. The reason I call it absence of a beat is that you could hear it in any sort of way. Jason, I'm going to ask you to clap eighth notes. Can you first clap in what would be like a 2/8? So 1 2 1 2 1 2. Sure. Now I'm going to cue us to start at B. Now can you clap 3? 1 2 3 1 2 3 1. And we're going to play the same music over this now, Jason, making it feel like it's in a 3. Great. Now let's do 4. And all of these could work, and they have a different feel. Like, I don't know about you, I'm being pulled to play it a certain way, yet we know that the time signature, we're in 5. So the reason I call it absence of a beat, the 5 doesn't matter anymore. And as we keep playing, you come in and add another texture to that makes it even more obfuscated as to what is this? And I think you stop hearing beats. I think you just get texture. And on top of all of this, we get Ryan's solo. Ryan, can you just play your solo for us that takes place on top of all of this?
Straight B.
Wherever that solo comes in.
Sure, I can do the top. Stop it!
I think if you just hear that, you can hear a very even 3. Da, dum, 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 dum. Now, I know it's not that,
Slightly
but
lopsided.
it could be very easily interpreted as that, and especially since we have all the stuff happening over here, it's like free reign. It's just is what it is, what it is, what it is. And what is it? The brain just fills in things for you all the time. I think this is a great example of that. Even though it's not that, it could create the illusion of that. And we're still on the 5/8. Okay, so talk about creating anticipation. Where he goes next, right after that, is now Ryan gets the ostinato. Can you just play it for us? This is that C. Here's what, just to remind anyone watching. Great. So, okay, we've had this at the start with the viola. We've had this time of no free time, all of this open, whatever, and then we come back to a very strict sense of the ostinato creating propulsion and drive. Yet, now he starts playing with what I'm going to call perceived meter. The viola gets something new that might make you hear it differently. Let me just play along with you at C. If you go just with my part alone, now on its own, it could be, again, any division of 2. But with this, it all of a sudden makes Ryan's ostinato go from being a 1-bar thing to being a 2-bar thing. Because on every 3rd bar, we meet up again where I start my 2s and Ryan starts to figure out 5. This, to me, is amazing writing in terms of every new section has something new happening with the rhythm. And I think it all lends itself to propulsion and drive. You don't need a rhythm section at all. You just need 4 players who can play somewhat rhythmically and together, which is a challenge in this piece. Do you guys have anything you want to add to that section before we play it?
Well, I do.
Okay.
Which is, you brought up the word texture, which is, and there's a lack of the rhythm section, or there's all of these different rhythms that can be combined and viewed like a prism from so many different angles. And then over top of that, John makes it super obvious, but what I'm feeling is this texture creates a very long line. It's almost like a singing kind of line that you can hear through this whole, or it just sort of goes on forever into the distance. You can see really far. Like a lot of maybe classical string quartet pieces, I'm very involved in the moment, but with this, it's like I can see forever. John writes a really long line melody. But this is also in Mark Mellitz's piece as well, with a lot of these interlocking rhythmic textures. It creates a long line for me, which is very, very cool. I just wanted to get that out.
Yeah,
I couldn't
no,
sit
it really
on
does.
any
It really
longer.
does.
Ah.
Let's play a section of it. Let's go from the beginning, and I think we're going to go until somewhere before E. We'll just stop it, just so you get a sense of what happens. Again, this is an awesome jazz chart. We have no rhythm section yet. I think John's able to create this illusion of absolute rhythm and drive all through what the rhythmic usage that we've been showing It's so fun. When we get to that point where I have the different perceived rhythm than you, as we were calling it, it just makes me have to like get into this. Oh man! And once we're starting to sound, we just go, and then all of a sudden over here, just this.
This is actually a little bit of a callback to the last week's episode, which is that you might have a recurring thing, but having something on top just creates a third thing that doesn't exist with either. And I don't ever play that ostinato, but I imagine I would probably play it differently at the beginning if it's just dun 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 dun, and then when you come in, it has the feeling of this. So every other one now feels like a hemiola, or not quite on the beat. So maybe instead of the other version, it's dun 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 dun, which I wouldn't get before that. It doesn't mean you have to play it that way, but like if I'm just listening to you two, I can in my brain sort of choose which version to go with, and
if you do it that way, dum bum 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 with that steady beat, big beat. With the ostinato, every other time is either on beats or off beats. That's really, I think that's really cool.
Right.
It's constantly changing, which is great.
Yeah,
Okay, so ostinato, rhythms, moving pulse, a lyrical rhythm that goes above it, a perceived metric change. All of these things, you throw it together and you get jazz. Or do you? Let's go to a completely different piece. Now, contractually, I technically can't say what this piece is yet. It's a huge project that we're going to be releasing in a little bit. I'm really excited about, but it's too perfect of a demonstration to not use. We're going to play something. Here's what's happening. Ryan gets this long, beautiful cello melody, and the three of us have different rhythms that go over that. before we play it all together, let's let you hear how it sounds. Let's start with just Jason and Ryan. Here's how it sounds with just these two playing. Okay, so this is a very easy to hear 3. 1, 2, 3, and 1. And Jason helps support that. All right, let's get Jason out of there. And let's have Aviva now play. So Ryan's playing the exact same music, the exact same spot, but now we're going to add only Aviva's part to that. So in her part, we have a different rhythmic value, first of all, but then we also have a different perceived meter. Hers can be very easily heard in a 2, just by the contour of the notes and the repetition. All right, let's have Ryan and I go, because the viola part, per usual, brings an extra, sometimes not invited, spice. Just hearing it, just the two of us playing, what does it change anything?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I know that you and Jason have the same rhythmic values as they like connect to Ryan's part, but the like impetus is a little funky.
Yeah.
Yeah, the groups of 5 make it. It's like your brain has to make this decision of who's in charge between the two in terms of how I'm organizing, the beat.
Well, and as the guy who plays the melody against all of these different things, and it's the same with John's ostinato. I play it against many different textures. The melody or the ostinato, it seems to behave differently depending on what it's paired with. So with each of you, I make different decisions to like make it sound nice. So
let's put it all together.
Yeah.
So is it a 4th version that how it directs you to play it when all of us are playing?
Somewhat, yes, it is. Because like your metaphor from earlier, how if you put a needle on, we were talking about how cross rhythms can, this was in Mark's episode from last week, when you add more complications, it sort of focuses what you do into like one path. You can call that more accuracy, you could call that more direction. So I've got more latitude when it's a simpler texture. When it's a very complicated texture, it's like, nope, this is the way to go. Mm-hmm. That's my sensation.
More cogs in the machine.
More cogs, yeah.
So in Quiet Phobias, we're talking about looking at different uses of rhythm, polyrhythm, feels of rhythm, and through that to create this jazz feel in terms of drive. Yet we get the same exact compositional concept here, and something that to me doesn't sound anything like jazz. Mm-hmm. So again, I think the content here doesn't really matter. It's in terms of how the genre is being laid out. Okay, so we've looked at the rhythmic side of things. We looked at using something like an ostinato. If those on their own create the feeling of jazz, then maybe it is actually have to do with the style. This is why I'm saying the content versus style. So let's look at something that is actually about style. A big thing is, even continuing with the thread of rhythm, is not mathematical or sensible rhythm, but your sensibilities of how to do rhythm, I think, is where style starts coming in. So with jazz, I think a huge thing is pocket. What does that word mean? Well, let's ask the expert, not me.
pocket usually is some sort of delayed offbeat. Like if you're playing in 4/4 time, beat 2 and beat 4 are going to be kind of slightly before that beat, so that it seems like you're creating a tension on the 2 and the 4 that needs to resolve on that next downbeat. So if you're playing a shuffle rhythm, bump, 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 this thing here creates the tension that needs to resolve on that next downbeat. Going along with that, swing is the same kind of idea in kind of a microcosm, because when you're swinging notes, you're playing a long short value, which also can be variable. And then your hits, for example, if you're doing a syncopation where you have, say an eighth note pickup on the end of 4 going into the next measure, that 4 is going to be short as well.
I love this idea of rhythm creating tension. Now, for anyone who didn't, it goes quickly, and there's a lot of info there. Let's unpack one thing. Very almost overly simplistic, but I think it'll work. Jace, will you clap 4? Sure. And I'm gonna count along with your 4. Let's do it a little slower. How about this tempo? I'm gonna count along with you, and little by little, I'm gonna let 2 and 4 in the counting against your clapping be a little delayed, just to show what he means when he says that the rhythm can be creating the tension.
Should I be?
You stay steady. You stay steady.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Stop
Can
it.
you guys feel it?
Stop it.
Those times where I'm not exactly on, it's like if you could feel your body do something. That is, in a sense, rhythmic pocket or swing. Of course, I'm doing a more crass version of it here to make the point. But that's where pocket can create, and this is where rhythmic sensibilities, I think, can come into style. So let's show this with music. Let's pull this up on the screen so everyone can see. We're going to take something from the Bach, Art of Fugue, his second contrapunctus. As you can see, it's written with dotted rhythms. We're going to take those out for a second. We're going to play everything as an eighth note. Anything that's a dotted rhythm here, we're going to play as an eighth note value. But all that really matters in terms of how you hear it is listen to the quality, the musical and poetic quality of how this might make you feel. So here's version 1. There's not a lot of rhythmic tension here at all. And what it does for me, at least, it lets my ear go to shape and tonality. But in terms of affect or character, does anything jump out to you guys?
It feels so smooth to me, rolling.
Sure.
Delicate. Not exactly singing, but there's gentle ebb and flow to it. Yeah.
Let's go to the complete opposite now. He has, as we can see in the page, actual dotted rhythms. Let's take that to an extreme. Let's double or even triple dot them. Yeah. So this means for anyone watching that the small 16th notes are going to be as close as they can to the next note, but we're not going to let the overall pulse change. Dun, 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 very close. And again, let's notice how the poetic element of what we're playing changes based on how we're doing this rhythm. My whole body changed. I feel like the long notes I want to hold shorter. My bow becomes much more angular. The things just completely have a different feel.
Plus, it also just gets riskier and riskier, right? It's fine if you maybe it's fine if you're alone. As soon as you're with someone else,
Yeah, it's tough.
how close are they daring to put it?
Yes.
Right? It's not just
Yes. All right, so let's split the difference. Let's go to what someone might call swing. We're going to call it just a lazy dotted rhythm. And let's notice how the feel of it changes it just by changing this our collective rhythmic sensibility. Does anyone? Yes, that's exactly it. I hope anyone listening had this feel. I'm over like, okay, yeah, I got it. That is the style. That is style. And that is purely influenced in this case by our decided rhythmic sensibility of how we're going to play something.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is true. I was thinking about it while we were playing it. What did we change? We changed the dotted rhythm, right? That was the conscious change. We weren't consciously trying to change anything else, yet everything was completely different in the three versions. At least it felt like I'm the third person, so I have two people to listen to. Okay, I'm going to try to match how Ryan and then Sean did these half notes, boom, boom, and then these quarter notes, and then this long tie. And all of them were different. And I had this thought of maybe the other element is literally like I have to physically execute this thing. So if I'm placing the 16th note as close as I can to the other, suddenly everything is a little more rigid. So that's like a physical reason. You know, it has maybe nothing to do with me consciously trying to do it. Maybe it is. And it just was an interesting thing, I suppose, that I was thinking about.
Definitely. Well, trying to be fair, I was trying to think of, okay, so I want to step away from jazz for a second and make this about the larger genre, topic of genre. If genre can be boiled down to style versus content, there has to be something where genre really matters. And I was trying to think of it, and while I was thinking from a compositional standpoint, I think I found something that I want to end with, which is shape versus form. Now, as a composer, I am going to sit down and write something, and I'm going to be very aware of the form. And the form is the organization. Here's the A section, here's now we're going to go here the A section comes back. That's form, right? And that's most basic level. And sometimes it could be the form of a motive, how the motive comes back, gets developed. It could be a larger area thing. But a lot of the time also, that is not necessarily the same thing as shape. Shape is, I would say, the emotive or the affective quality at any given point in time during the piece. So for instance, my form for a piece is going to be A, B, C, A. Those are the sections, but my shape is definitely not going to be start huge and then for the rest of the piece come down, because that would make an awful piece. So who would want to sit down through the rest of that? What I'm going to do is I'm trying
to think of examples of what you're talking about.
Yeah, try it. So I try. I could not think of one, and I think there's good reason for that, especially if it's like a 20-minute piece. But the shape might be this. It starts here, it builds, comes back down, it gets bigger. Okay, now here's a shape, and that's different than the form.
Sorry, I'm thinking about a piece that gets less exciting the longer you listen to it, but like on purpose, and it's just...
It exists.
Ridiculous.
It's somewhere.
I'm sure. Or someone will write it. No.
Okay. So now when I think of a typical jazz work or piece, of course there are through composed jazz, big band jazz charts and everything. But when I think of a standard way of playing jazz, you get a tune that has the head. Everyone plays the head. Now we go through and we each take a solo, and then we end with the head. So it's A, B, C, D, something, A. The form is basically always the same with variation. Maybe they throw the head in somewhere in the middle, A, B, C, A, E, F, A. But there's still some sense of continuity. You can expect, you know what to happen in a jazz tune. But what really changes is the shape. Let's say that we are playing X tune, we come in, we play the head, Ryan takes a solo, and it is just just the smallest shape. It's understated. It's not there. And I'm thinking, oh, this is boring. So I come in all blasting, going, and then it's Jason's turn. He's like, oh, well, he thinks he can do I can up that. He goes even bigger. And then Aviva's like, oh, whatever, I don't care. And it kind of tails off. Okay, so now we have this shape. Bigger, tails off. Now the next day we think, hey, we're all in good moods. We should try and create a longer arc. We play the head, and Ryan gets a shape. It starts this way, it grows here. I just take it right where Ryan left off. Jason takes it right where I left off, and Aviva continues it, and we create one giant shape between all of our solos. The form is the same, but the shape is going to be different every single time a jazz piece is played. Or a piece that is organized in the same way that I'm saying that this jazz piece might be organized. Let's show that. In Quiet Phobias, everything is written out, which means John has had to think about both the form and the shape that he wants to get across for the listener, with the exception of one place. Towards the end, we get a true viola improv. And by true improv, I mean, there are no notes. He said, here's a scale, go at it. And actually, we should play the clip first, because he had a very specific idea in mind for what is the function of that solo.
When I'm thinking about, say, a jazz piece, the composer is actually giving you the ideas that they want you to use. Interval ideas, they're giving you chord ideas, they're giving you phrase ideas, and those are things that you should really kind of look for when you're improvising, as opposed to kind of just playing, lick 51C that you learned out of some book, In Quiet Phobias, my thought with that was, it's more of an intensity idea. We had all the overlapping lines, and then we get to this part, and it's kind of a static harmonic part, but the improvisation gives it a certain intensity, is really what I was looking for. In jazz, you're playing the head, everybody's kind of playing the head, and then it goes off, and then usually there's some sort of arc where the improvisation will build in an intensity, and then maybe come down for the next soloist, and then go up, and then come down, and then you come off of it at a high level of intensity to play the written head out again, is usually what it is. So that's where I'm at now, as I'm thinking in terms of, like, what do I want to happen intensity-wise? What do I want the listener to perceive, rather than, oh, here's some notes that this person needs to play.
All right, so let's look at that. We're going to start halfway through. This is leading into the viola solo, or the viola improv. And it's funny that he said that when we were talking about it, because that was my exact thinking, was that, oh, we're going to have this music. It's going to come down to a small point. I'm going to let the viola solo improv kind of do this kind of thing. Small, big. I have a point where it finally goes to, and then when we lead off to the outro of the tune that's written out, mind you, I'm going to let it settle down into it so that it feels like, here we are at this place. Let's hear that. This is from H.
This is really small, so okay, here we go.
and then the new section would come in. It's been set up. All right, so now let's do a completely different shape. Now, for the first part, before the viola improv, it has to be the same. It's written out. The form is the same, the shape is the same. But I'm going to change the solo, and we're going to lead into the same section of music, but I think it's going to feel completely different, like a very different piece, just by me changing the shape. So here we go, same spot. Then the new section starts. All of a sudden, it's a completely different thing. And this, to me, is where I thought, okay, yes, there is a difference. Genre does matter, but it's not where it would be the things I might think it would matter. Those are two very different skills. For us to be able to come in as players and change the shape every day, and every piece that we're playing over and over and over, especially us as a string quartet, where part of our job is consistency, trying to get a really high level of accuracy and keeping that. Wow. Well, our skill then lies a lot in a composer has already thought about that shape, and all we have to do is interpret that shape and find a way to make it happen. We can't change where the high point is in the Beethoven string quartet movement. It's always going to be in that same place. We might be effective or not effective. You might do it well or not well, but we can't change that this is the high point of that. That's a completely different set of skills. Yet, we have to do all of those, maybe in different ratios. So ultimately, I do think we are jazz. I think any musician who has the right motives, who has the right ear, the right training, the right combination of brain and heart for what they're doing, is jazz, is classical, is Baroque on some level, is pop, because it is all cut from the same cloth. Perhaps the genre is just delving into a specific affect using a slightly different aspect than the others, and that's why we call it that. Of course, genre is also just convenient for selling, which is probably a big part of it. I thought we would end today's show by playing some that we've not played yet at all on the show. This is a piece by Harvey Cummings II called Lost in the Sauce. I thought it'd be fun to, since we've been diving into jazz and styles and genre and all of this, that it'd be fun for you as a listener and for us as players to leave all of that aside. That we're not going to worry about genre, we're not going to worry about style. What we're going to worry about and concern ourselves with is the tonality of this work. How does that influence us to play a specific way right now in this moment? The reacting to what each of us is doing. How is Ryan going to start this opening rhythm, and how does that influence me to use all the technique that I have, and how's that going to influence Jason to respond in a way, and Aviva to pull us somewhere else, and that this is at its core music removed from all those things, which to me is music at its best probably. Hope you enjoy Lost in the Sauce.